Good morning, welcome. This is Write Once, Deploy to Multiple Mobile Platforms. And I am Mehul Harry. I'm a program manager for the web technologies at a company called DevExpress. And this is my contact info. So we're sponsoring this event, and we've got some technologies that we've heavily invested in the last couple of years, and you might not have heard about them. So that's why we got this big old booth over here. We're doing big splash here, but today I'm going to focus in on a couple of things. So these are products we have in the HTML5 space. Now they're completely essentially what you would consider client side. There's no, except for the testing piece, there's no server portion of it at all. And so PhoneJS is what I'll be covering mostly today. Now, just going to ask, I doubt many of you actually have heard of it, but how many of you have heard of PhoneJS? Oh, awesome. All right. Just out of curiosity, how many of you have heard of Test Cafe? All right, great. Even better, because you'll have to come to my talk tomorrow to hear about Test Cafe. And ChartJS is essentially in the same space. So it is a framework, not a platform. And just to say the difference, a framework is anything that's client-side versus a platform is essentially server-side. So PhoneJS provides a HTML5 framework. So while I'm not going to talk a whole lot about ChartJS, I thought I'd give you a quick intro, which is it's got 3 main widgets. Now, I'm going to say a lot of buzzwords. If something doesn't make sense, don't worry, I'll be happy to cover them again. But in essence, these widgets provide these beautiful client-side animations. And while I'm not going to show it here today, if you are interested, come see me after. I'll be happy to show you all sorts of things about it. So there's a chart widget, gauge widget, and range selector. Now, PhoneJS. So it is a HTML5 JavaScript-based framework, and it provides you, I think its best feature is it provides a way for you to create mobile web apps. Now, it is called phone, so it is targeted at mobile devices and tablets, phablets, whatever, anything that is not desktop oriented. Now, that was by design. We are kind of looking in the desktop space as well, but in essence, we wanted to have a solution that approached this. Now, how many of you are doing native app development right now? Well, not kind of surprising. All right. And how many of you are using something like jQuery Mobile today? All right. And how many of you love jQuery Mobile? No, I'm kidding. So in essence, we saw out there what was possible, right? And there's the joke that there's a framework born every minute. Now, there is a point to create something. Creating a product is hard work, as as devs. So, we didn't want to invest years of our time into this, something that didn't make sense. So there's a certain philosophy every framework takes. And I think once you see the approach we've taken, you'll see that there's some benefits to it. All right, so it's one language, it's one code base, one SDK, meaning that you're only going to write in one language like JavaScript, essentially for the back end, HTML for the front end. And it provides you support for 2 ways to data bind, jQuery and Knockout. Now, one of the philosophy approaches we took was we were going to build this on top of open source technologies. So we essentially adopted Knockout, we adopted jQuery, Globalize, and we're big fans of PhoneGap because they have solved a big problem in terms of talking to devices to get native access and so forth. Now, just out of curiosity, I'm making some assumptions here. How many people are familiar with PhoneGap? Excellent. All right. So it uses a SPA framework, a single page application. Now, if just not familiar with single page application, it's a way to encapsulate all of the logic and UI on the client side, so you don't need to go to the server except for maybe some data. And we do provide everything in terms of the whole framework, in terms of routing, the model collection views that I'll show you in a moment. And as I mentioned, it does provide it. Now, so at the end of the day, this is the problem it solves, right? So you can use something like jQuery Mobile, or you can try to write native using Objective-C and so forth. But we thought that isn't the best approach for this. And so using PhoneJS, you can target anything out there for Android, iPhone, iPad, tablets, phablets, supporting Windows Phone now as well, Surface tablets. And you're not going to have to worry about what you write in. Now, this is essentially all HTML5. There's nothing proprietary to this other than maybe some of our widgets, but other than that, it's all open source technologies that it's built on. So let's see this in action. All right, so when you first download PhoneJS, you get essentially a small zip file. The zip file contains an application template, which I'm going to show you in just a second, some demos, the EULA, and some other libraries that we're using. So in the application template, it's very simple. So what do you need to get started? Essentially, you can use Apache web server. I've got IIS Express installed, so I'll use that. But in essence, anything that hosts a local file, or you could upload it to your server. Now in this case, I'll launch IIS Express, and I've just got to point it to my little folder here. All right, now when you first launch, this is it, right? You're like, wow, that's nothing. And it isn't, right? In essence, though, what you see there is the very, very core basic framework layout, right? We've got some navigation at the top, we've got some views. So what's happening behind the scenes here is that every time we click on a different view, it is dynamically loading that view using that SPA framework, whereas we're going to see in a little minute. We'll get into some code in a little bit. But what's happening here is that once I actually run this on different platforms, different devices, it will automatically adjust. So, we've had our designers study all the guidelines for Android, for iOS, build that particular look. So I'm going to use Ripple here. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. It's a fantastic little plugin. It comes as a plugin for Chrome now. And in essence, I can tell it, okay, listen, I'm actually running this on a Nexus 7 tablet. And as I do that, it detects what device I'm running on and automatically just says, oh, well, navigation's at the top for Android devices. So I'm going to put that up there. And you're on the Home tab here. So I'm going to give you that view. Now, if you're running this on an iPhone 5, it's automatically going to adjust. Now, it also supports iOS 7. So, and it knows that navigation's at the bottom. All right, now, let me show you a couple of things about what is possible here. Oops. All right, so this is one of the demos that we've got in your local source. Now, granted that, as I said, this is all available locally. So we've got 3 demos that we package in there just to kind of show you what the view structure is like and so forth. And I explained the sort of layout, right? In every view has a sort of a data logic place where you put it in the JS files, and the CSS is just the styling. All right, so in the kitchen sink, this is essentially everything that's available in there, all the widgets, right? So for example, what forms look like, right? Now, if we actually ran this on a more native looking simulator, maybe you might see a little bit better here. All right, so, well, there you go, I crashed it. All right, so there's all sorts of widgets for you to create every type of view you can imagine. Everything from, so we didn't want to just create a way for you to go, look, here's a nice little button and so forth. It lets you create full forms, and the forms include everything from widgets for dates, checkboxes and so forth. We've got maps and lists. So rather than go through all the whole list of this, what I want to do is I want to show you a sample of what it's like to create this. Now, um, just from a show of hands, what type of IDE do you guys prefer these days? How many people use, let's say, just something like Sublime? Wow, okay. WebStorm, okay. Eclipse. All right. Now, how many of you ever used something like Visual Studio? Wow, that's surprising. I didn't expect as many, but all right, that makes it much easier. So, uh, I'm gonna give you a quick history, right? So this company I work for, Dell Express, has been around 15 years, mostly in the Microsoft space. So when this thing first came out, right, this framework we built, we said, look, it is essentially for a different set of developers out there. It is not for the Microsoft devs, right? But you know, Microsoft devs, they gotta get kicked around a lot, right? So there was this talk internally like, yeah, but they need the help, right? They need the help to create this kind of stuff, right? So we invested in Visual Studio, and that doesn't mean, right? Because every time we show this, and what I'm gonna show you is pretty awesome. But the first thing you're gonna ask is like, that's great. Now when are you gonna do that for Eclipse, right? So we get that a lot, and it's just to tell you, we are looking into it. So given that, what I want to show you is what it's like to build and customize an app using this, right? Now, I want to show you an app that essentially allows you to create something. So allows you to create a data-driven, data coming from a server, not necessarily local. Now, you can have all sorts of data stores with PhoneJS. They can be local, they can be cached, I mean, SQL. We don't care. We're agnostic to that. We're essentially saying we're helping you present the UI and a framework for how views and layouts are done. So what I want to show is something similar to this that says, look, we have a set of data out there, and now I want to display that. So what I thought might be fun is to show this data. So the city of San Francisco provides crime incidents information about for the past 3 months, right? And what's great is you can export this and import it in. So what I've done is I took this data, and if we want, we can see it in a grid format here. So in essence, it gives us things like what type of crime it was, what the description it was, some other information. So I thought, well, you know, what would be interesting is that we have also the location and the date and time. And that's really useful because what happens if I'm out in San Francisco, you know, and not to pick on the Tenderloin, but there tends to be a lot of crime in the Tenderloin. I'm not from San Francisco, by the way, though I love the city. But anyways, let's say I'm out there and I'm like, oh, it's 9:30. Has there been crimes around here on Monday night? We'll find out, right? And it's just always interesting to kind of dig into data, right? And then to kind of plot it out there. And we have GPS coordinates. Well, our devices support GPS, right? So let's make an app that says, you know, to inform somebody out there that, hey, listen, if you're out there and you want to know what's been happening, great. Or if you want to just get out there and look for trouble, that's up to you as well, right? So what we want to do is essentially say, as a developer, what does it take to create something like this? So, all right, so what I'm going to show you is just something that we've built specifically for this. It doesn't really require it. So the first thing I'm going to show you is that when we got data like this, so I have 20,000 rows. Now, that's not a good idea to put into the client side, so I'm not going to do that. Now, if I want to take a subset where I go, well, I'm just going to take a week, I might want to throw that into like Breeze.js or, you know, some other SQL local data store, and then I just have it there. I don't need to go to the server at all. But in this case, my data does live on the server. So what I'm going to do is create a little web service. Now, I'm using this thing called WCF. There's a ton of options. It doesn't matter what you use. You could use Ruby on Rails as long as it supports OData. That's the standard, right? So that's the standard it's based on. As long as it's just throwing down some JSON data, you're okay. So, and we'll just call this our crimes data service. So if you're not familiar with this, all this is a wizard for Entity Framework, which is an ORM from Microsoft. You don't really have to use this. It just makes this demo like much easier rather than you having to see me create a whole list of objects that you'll see in a minute. All it does is inspect a table. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to tell it, hey, go to the local SQL here, and here's where I imported in the data. And then it's going to go, hey, look, I see one table in there. I said, yes, that's what I want. And now it's going to inspect the table, find all the columns in it, create a similar object based on that. And then we also threw in something like support for cores and Jsonp. Now, if you plan to do any data editing over OData, then you need support for those standards. And we custom wrote those just because at the time there wasn't good implementations of them. So they're there. So in essence, we've got this now. And if we take a look at this data service, I'm just going to view it in the web real quick. And we were to deploy this somewhere, it's going to say, yeah, great. There's a data service. You got a object in there called crime incidents, and I'll say, okay, that's fine with me. So we'll just leave that data service up and running. Now, let's create an app. So when we click new here, I've got a file new project template here that brings up this wizard, right? Now, in here, you can choose. Now, you say, hey, I thought you said it was just for phones and not for web. Well, clearly you're thinking in this space, right? I get a lot of questions, people going, yeah, desktop, HTML5, using something like Angular and so forth. So, Google has essentially set the standard for desktop client-side apps, and they do a great job. So we're definitely thinking in that space. But, our customers are definitely coming from an area where they're trying to move away from a thick client that had maybe a dashboard or something like a heavy grid. And to sort of really port that is, to do it right, you got to essentially make sure that the features that they want are capable, right? Because to go from a compiled language to something like JavaScript, you're going to lose some things, right? But you're going to gain some things as well, right? So it's going to be more responsive, but you're also not going to be able to get as much data, perhaps, or display it all at once, or perhaps try to do some master detail layouts. But that's a different topic. So anyways, in this case, I want to build a mobile app. Now, when I select that, I get this option for the type of navigation. So it says, okay, what do you want to build? Do you want to build something with a bottom navigation, which is very standard, it's on iPhone, it's on Android, or do you want to have a slide out where essentially the navigation's hidden and only displayed when you press this button? Well, I'm going to stick with the standard navigation layout. Now, this is where sort of the magic unicorns come in, right? So this is the part of the, it's a custom wizard we made, but in essence, it could be anybody's OData feed out there. But this is where we say, listen, give us what data you have out there. Tell me what type of views you want to build, right? Because this is going to build us, for us, essentially everything. So I tell it, hey, I've got this web service out there, and go inspect it. When it does, it says, yeah, I found something called crime incident. You want me to make a model, a view? And I'll say yes. Now, when I click finish, what it's doing, in essence, it's going to create that application template using the same layout that we saw before that has, listen, this is our JavaScript files in here, our CSS, and our views. Now, our views essentially are the main thing that controls it, right? So the main file, index.js, as you would expect from most SPA applications, doesn't really have anything other than load up a lot of libraries, right? So this is just the setup. And there's only the main viewport that gets swapped in and out from all these views that we're going to see in a second. So let's just take a look at this and the browser, right? So when I run this, I think that's probably the most impressive thing, right? So the other thing is when you run this from VS, right, we give you this nice little Chrome and everything. But in essence, it says, look, now I've went out to your web service, wherever the heck it is, and I found there's a list of this, right? Now, automatically it chose the first text-based column, which was category. And it says, look, I've got these categories, and when I click on them, it's going to take me to a detail page. And then on top, it gives me ability to edit this data as well, right? Now, that was just essentially from doing a couple of file new clicks when let it create this view. And that's a fantastic way to get started, right? Now, this doesn't have to be done with Visual Studio. It just saves a little bit of time in terms of creating the views. The exact same thing can be built with Sublime. So in essence, though, I like what it's done for me, but I don't want to make this an app that allows editing or adding crime incidents. I want this to be an informational app. So I'm going to show you how to customize it by removing these commands that allow it to add or edit information. Now, just to show you, it is adaptive. It automatically adapts when I go to Android, and it says, oh, an Android device doesn't use those weird colors from Apple and so forth. So on a tablet, it automatically adjusts for the size. Now, the great thing about this is Android has a lot of devices out there, a lot of different form factors. This allows you to mitigate that because it's responsive, right? It's going to adjust automatically because the views are all just simple HTML5 divs that we're going to see in a second. But the best part is that this look and feel. So right now, I'm able to essentially have this the scroll, and when I scroll down, it's going to go and query and get some more data. It's all built right into it, right? Now, there's a feature that I'm just going to mention right now. When you want to test this thing, you've got this simulator. You saw me run another simulator. I've got a browser-based simulator. I can set the URL string through Chrome Developer Tools. There's a lot of things I can do, but they all suck compared to actually running it on the device. Well, to run this on the device, you got to deploy it, right? Now, if you're on the Apple developer program, you know that takes a couple of hoops to jump through. You got to provision the app, then you got to make the certificate, et cetera, et cetera. And I just want to test this. I just want to see what it looks like while I'm developing on my machine right now. So what we've done essentially is created sort of like a man-in-the-middle proxy server. It's out there in the cloud. So when you run this right now, look at the URL, you'll see that it goes to this proxy, right? And this proxy server, what it's doing essentially is just registering my local machine and saying, ah, I see you, you've got this thing. And it generates this QR code. Now, if you guys want, you can scan this QR code right now through your device. Whether you're on Android, iOS, or Windows Phone, it's going to navigate you to my local machine. So I can set breakpoints if I've got some crazy logic that I want to work through. But you're all going to be coming to this machine. And that's the best way, right? Because you're now seeing what this looks like on your device because it's going to it's going to be native, right? So if I run this on my iPhone 5S right now, it's going to go, oh, okay, you're on iOS 7. I'm going to give you that look for iOS 7. If you're on iPhone 4, it's going to give you the iOS 6 look, et cetera, et cetera. So it is a great, great way to test the device, and I really like it. All right, so let's customize this thing. So first thing is, I don't like the way it says crime incidents. I don't even have an icon for crime incidents. Let's actually add like a search capability as well. So allow them to find different incidents, right? So if they're curious about some incident. All right, so as I mentioned, there are 3 files. Now, each view has the HTML file. In this case, it's called DXView. You could call it HTML, but when you make it through Visual Studio, it calls it DXView because this is another one of those things that was added. Now, this is all, how do I say, this is all done as a plugin on top of Visual Studio. The stuff that I showed you, it really doesn't affect the framework at all. So PhoneJS has really very little to do with it other than these added benefits we added for the VS crowd out there. So when I double click and open this DXView, one of those things we did was we added a designer. So this designer gives you the capability to see, it's not a sort of a full designer in the sense like you're going to go crazy, but it does give you a great little preview of what it's going to look like. So in this case, right here at the bottom of the screen, I've got this command called add, right? And in the toolbox, I've got all these widgets that I can use, everything from the ChartJS stuff to PhoneJS, tiles, dates, text boxes, and so forth. Or if I prefer, I don't need to work in this view at all. I can just open this directly as straight HTML and ignore that altogether. So in this case, let me just show you guys the designer. Now, one of the things is you probably see this little commented out code, and that's just because a lot of times people would add a product and they'd have an image. Images are powerful. Highly recommend images. I would say thank God in this case, with our data, there's no images. We wouldn't want images. But in this case, if you wanted, had a product like a bicycle or something like that, and I'll show you a little demo of a skateboard demo that we made, that you can essentially show an image, and I highly recommend it because, like I said, that will get, studies have shown that gets clicks much more than simple text. So in this case, though, I don't need this image image tag at all. So we're just going to dump that. Now, the way we control commands is this object called dxCommand. This is the thing that essentially allows adding, right? And if you take a look at it, it's very much straightforward, right? So the framework essentially looks at this and says, okay, you want the action when they click on this command to take him to crime incident edit view, and you picked out an icon and what the title is, etc., etc., etc. That's all great, but we want to dump that, right? And as soon as we do, and I update this view here, we can see that it got rid of the little plus sign at the top. Now, I also said that I didn't want to use category. Now, if we look at our model that it generated for us, it just picked category. But I really want to use description. Description tends to provide more info. So let's just replace that text with description. And I want to make one other change. I said I wanted to be able to allow them to do a search. So alright, so let me just pull in a DX text box, and we're going to dump it right on top of our list. Now, this text box, we can define some properties for it. So what we want to do is I want to define some properties for its placeholder and what kind of function it's going to do for searching. So and we're going to define a mode, and the mode will simply be search. Now, there is a great set of online documentation that essentially covers all of this information. And finally, for value, we're going to say search. Now, this essentially defines a function that we haven't created yet. So we're going to do that in just a second. And just to show you kind of a quick preview of this, we've got a little search. So essentially, we defined a placeholder. So we could have called it, find crimes, whatever, what the mode is. There's different modes out there, but setting it for search sets it up for automatically, when we clear it out, that it'll send a callback to refresh the list, as we're seeing in just a second. All right, so every view also has a code, a set of code associated, right? So as I mentioned, this is all JavaScript. Now, this is the view model. So the first thing I want to do is I want to extract this out and call it view model. So we're going to call this view model. And we'll create a view model variable for this. And I want to extract out this bit as well, because we're going to do something with the data source. That is going to come in quite handy, so we'll need a variable for the data source. And because what I want to do is I'm actually going to search on the value that they enter in the text box. So what I'll do is I'll take this application.crimeincidents and encapsulate this as a data source. So there is a toData source property. All right, and finally, this is now in our view model. We can define our search function. Now, if you've not used Knockout before, I'm going to make an assumption that in essence, knockout is it's a two-way data binding, similar to what you'd find with something like Angular, Ember, and so forth. We just happen to kind of choose knockout first. It's a very good data binding. It provides model view, view model approach, but you're free to use almost any data binding you want. So in the view model, we've defined a search function. Now we actually have to set it up. So what we're going to do is say view model dot search and create a subscribe function. So this is a sort of a knockout way of telling that, listen, when they pass in a value into that text box, I want you to take that value and search. And so we're going to use the dataset.filter command, and in it we will say search on the description field, which is the one we're using, and the search type is anything that contains against the value. All right, and finally, let me make one other change. Now, I did mention that I didn't like that icon in the naming. So to change that around, I'm just going to open this application config file. So this is one way you would create essentially new views and new navigation items, right? So let's say if we wanted a new one that said, you know, title could be like buy. Let's say I was selling some kind of, you know, night light watch or something like that. And this is the action would be what view it's going to, right? So buy. This view doesn't actually exist yet. So we probably won't have any information on it. So, but just to show you, that's how easy it is. Now, from here, we'd probably want to go and actually create the view in here. So that actually it's represented. But just by adding that little bit right there, I'm able to add an extra navigation point. But let's customize our climb incident. So let's get an incident. Now, let's pick an icon. Now, one of the things is that we try to do a lot in terms of giving you as a lot as possible. So one of the things is we packed a lot of icons in here, right? I mean, we have graphic designers, and I'm not a good graphic designer, so I always appreciate the ability to take something like a nice icon and have it embedded for me. So I thought about what could make for a good icon. So I'm thinking maybe this runner, right? Because for me, crime, I want to run. I'm really good at running, right? Away from things. So I'm gonna use the little runner icon, and to reference it, all you have to do is just tell the icon portion which one to use. Now, if you've got a custom one, that's great. Just define it in the CSS, reference it in the icon here. There's just a set of default icons that most people commonly use for information, home, different ones, money, dollar sign, etc., etc. So, in fact, what was that one with the money dollar sign? Okay, so money. Let's change that to money. All right, so now let's take a look at these little updates. So the first thing is we have a little search text box up at the top. We've cleaned up our navigation now, so we've got a little beautiful little runner icon. And what's great is, you know, as we adapt it for Android, it's smart enough to draw that as well, right? So this is the default look for Android. And now, if we've done our search right, then, you know, we can look for something like, you know, find me everywhere where there's been like a death. So when I click that, automatically out of the 20,000, it goes and filters out for me from my data source just those items, right? And now I can do something like, you know, hey, let's say I want to know where that death report was. Well, in this case, it tells us, hey, this was, you know, in the Mission District on the 2000 block, and here's actually some XY coordinates. Well, XY coordinates are great because that allows us to see and map it, right? So let's do that. Let me just show you real quick how easy it is to map this. So I'm going to dump this view and just to drop a map widget and use those coordinates and quickly map it. So, but just to see real quick that, you know, it's really slick in that by adding a little bit of from the framework, I can probation, if I can spell, it's going to get for me, and we've got this functionality. I did say that you got to be careful because it is easy to create this stuff, right? Because we wanted to keep it easy and open, right? It's all HTML5 and so forth, and I've got this little by thing, but I didn't actually create the view. And this is where it crashes. It goes, yeah, I don't find that view that you're looking for. Now, the way it knows how to do that is routing. Now, so we've got routing that's all defined in here. And if you want to change out and create your own routing, etc., you can do that, right? We've got a whole set of tutorials based on this kind of stuff. So, well, let me ask you this. How many of you guys want me to show you how to do the map thing? All right, I'll quickly show you then. And then I will finish with questions. So the crime incidents detail is where it's going to, right? So here, we've got all these commands. Now I can use actually this designer if I want to delete it out, or I can do it from here. So for example, I don't need all of these fields, so let's just dump them. Now if I refresh this, we've got essentially a clean slate here. And now I'm just going to dump a map widget on here. Alright, so now in the map, this is where I can tell the map how big, how I want it to zoom, etc., I need markers and so forth. So here instead, I'm going to say you're going to get your map settings from the view model. So I'm simply going to create a little holder for it, and we're done. So we'll just leave that alone for now. And now in the details, I can get rid of these items here. I don't really need to handle any deletes and so forth. Now I do want to abstract out something, but in the interest of time, I'm gonna pull in some info here. But I will explain it for sure, don't worry. All right, so the only difference was that I abstracted out similarly the way I abstracted out the view model, right? And the only reason that was that so I can add these map settings. Now the map settings takes a few parameters: zoom, location, markers. Markers is an array because essentially markers are those pins. So when you look up something on Google Maps or Bing or something like that, you get a little marker when it says, oh yeah, this is the restaurant you were looking for. And so you have a way to control that here. So markers is an array. We just set the height and width. The zoom, I set a default value, but I did tell it that, hey, listen, this is an observable field, right? So as you get it from the data you're binding to, that's what you should be updating to. Now, the line of code essentially that we wanted was this. So this map position essentially grabs the x and y coordinates, and from there, we're simply creating a marker that says, listen, the tooltip is the description, and the location is the map position of the x and y. And if they do any kind of click on the actual pin, just take them to Google Maps, right? Now, what's great is, all right, let's just take a look at this. Probably I didn't. Sorry about that. All right, so crime incidents. There you go. And yeah. All right, so let's just take a look at that again. Yeah. Sorry, I've got some other code in there for my new app. All right, so I'm sorry. I'll show you guys that are interested afterwards, because it's getting close to the time, and I don't want to keep the those of you who are looking to get to the next session. So let me just show you one other thing, and it's because looking at these nice little demos is fine and so forth. If you spend any bit of time though with this, the next likely question you're going to have is, hey, that's great. What kind of stuff can you build? If the Wi-Fi here is working all right. All right, so this is a demo essentially built with PhoneJS. It can load up on your Android and so forth. This is obviously one that we took a little more time with, right? Not necessarily for the navigation or so forth, but mostly the graphics, right? Because for me, I'm mostly on the dev side. I suck at graphic design. So, this is something where we went to the designers and said, hey, yeah, we want to make something interesting. And so in this case, let's say you wanted to create an app that allows somebody to build a skateboard. You had an online skateboard store. And your products was they can allow them to select the deck, give them a list of these products, and as I mentioned, there's an image there as well, and if they like it, they can select it. Now what's great is, there's different views you can present based on tablet. Now you might be asking, well, how is that possible? Is this automatically just adjusting? Not exactly, right? Because I did know in this case that on a tablet I want to present a different view. So what happens is, in that HTML view file, I simply created an option up there that said, listen, this is for the phone view, and this is for the tablet view. And the tablet view, I tended to define an extra image or two, or a little bit more into the list, because I have that space available. Now, I recommend doing that because, as you know, building the best experience for any device is to kind of focus in on it. I mean, relying on responsive is fine, but there's times when it's not going to work out, right? Because maybe the device is too small or it's too big, right? Sometimes you can have a tablet and not enough content to fill it out, then it just looks like you don't have enough to show there. So in this case, on a tablet experience is great as well. And so when I go back to phone, oops. Then I can select the wheels. Let's just select something like this. And then when they order the skateboard. Now, as you saw, that little pop-up is one of these things. So there's even notifications built into this, right? So I can have this as a small item. I can have this as a quick flash pop-up and so forth. But there's a lot of little items built right in that you may possibly need, right? And so that's just an example of something beautiful you can build with PhoneJS. So with that, I will say a couple of last things is that PhoneJS, a couple of those, we have some templates out here on GitHub I recommend that you check out. So this kitchen sink demo, the other application, and there's a project out there called Property Cross. A couple of guys in the UK wanted to actually test all the different frameworks out there that they can get their hands out for and see how hard it was to write for them. And they contacted us and said, hey, we'd love to try this thing. So Property Cross is something that they built, and it's using our PhoneJS, but there's a lot of other frameworks out there. So if you're curious, what does Property Cross look like with jQuery Mobile? jQuery Mobile is fine, looks dandy. You got to do a lot of customizations, though. You can't get that custom look for it, right? And so there's some advantages to every framework. I think PhoneJS gives you this framework, and if you want to see how it compares, this Property Cross is a good example of what's out there against, and it's one app, the same app written with different frameworks. All right, so I just showed you some of the Visual Studio stuff, and finally, please come by the Test Cafe talk. Now, I'll simply mention that it's testing done in a way that you've not seen before. It's built on Node, so it runs on different platforms. It's browser-based. It's all runs on anything HTML5. And it's really slick because, especially if you're doing something with mobile web apps, especially in browser mobile apps. So, for example, Facebook has an app browser within it. And if you ever try to do testing within there, you'll see it's almost impossible. And tomorrow I'm going to show you something very interesting with Test Cafe. So, with that, I'll take questions. Please drop by this URL, js.devexpress.com. Find me on Twitter. I would love to hear your feedback. Like I said, we're around. We've got these like HTML5 shirts. Come check them out. Have a talk. Oh, I hear that that our booth is going to have something interesting later at the meetup, something like beer. Didn't hear it from me. But anyways, I'd love to meet you guys and talk with you. With that, any questions?
I want to know about commercial use. I think there's a licensing fee and stuff. Right?
Yeah, great question. So he's asking, what is the licensing like? It is free for personal use. And for commercial use, you do need a license. And that's just because, we've got guys around the clock making sure when something breaks for one, platform that we get a fix out for it, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, in essence, it's, I think, a couple $100. Yeah, it's $199 for the just straight PhoneJS. If you want it bundled with ChartJS, you can get a $400 or $500. All right, excellent. Thanks very much, guys. I really appreciate it.